I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Brian Hurst, and we're going to talk about social audio. What is it? How you can benefit from it? How you can get involved? Brian's a big mover in the social audio world, so there's no better person to talk about it. Brian, I always ask people this before we get in. So anybody who's watching the first 30 seconds of this video then can find you. Where can people get hold of you?
Hey, Tim. Hope you're having a good day so far. Folks can get a hold of me mainly on Twitter at Brian Hurst01. Again, Brian Hurst01. That's going to be the best place. LinkedIn as well for other industry professionals is a good spot as well. So mainly those are the two channels, Twitter and LinkedIn.
Perfect. So how did you get caught up in all of this? Because social audio, I mean, I think I spent last summer on Clubhouse. And so how did you get caught up in the social audio world?
I got started into it when I started to see chatter of Clubhouse, the exclusivity factor, with the invites, almost like an entertainment or nightlife kind of feel. Like, did you get tickets to this club or this nightlife? So that kind of added some intrigue, almost like the anticipation of when you were going to get it. It wasn't just like a public drop, which was effective at the time, especially when folks are still at home to a large degree and the intrigue factor isn't there for a lot of industries. Like movies wasn't as big on the forefront. So that was kind of the start of it. And then when Twitter Spaces entered the arena, that's when it kind of brought it home, because it wasn't starting from, let's say, a ground level. And it did allow for brands and nonprofits to jump on it as well. So I did a lot of experimentation with my nonprofit, which is AMA Boston, the American Marketing Association in the Boston area.
And so, yeah, I know that, the best nightclub in the world is the one with the longest queue, isn't it?
Right.
And I remember, this exclusivity or fear of missing out, the fact that, to get on there, you had to get an invite. And then I would always have people ringing me up, like, do you have any invites to Clubhouse or something? It's like as if I'd have some exclusive key to get into the
right.
So what's your definition of social audio? What's it all about?
I think it has a variety of different forms. It's almost like an amoeba type platform. But I think the best way to describe it is an audio conference, or what I like to say as well is a kind of like a drop-in radio style. It has factors of your traditional radio, except on a virtual platform, while having some of the major platforms behind it, LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse as well. So I think it goes in and out of what it's described as mainly. I think it helps depending on who you're talking to, what they might understand. If they're more traditional, more radio style, you could say drop in audio, or I just say it as a audio conference because I'm attending a conference. It's just virtually in that kind of format.
Yeah, it always reminds me of a talk radio where you can just turn up and listen, or you can take part. And I also noticed that Spotify is investing a lot in this because of their podcast position on audio. They're also investing a lot in the social audio space as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. Spotify, I heard speak at a digital conference called Inbound, and their chief content officer at the time said the voice/podcast is a huge priority of hers. And then I just saw recently in the last week or two that they moved their native application onto or in process of moving it to their main app. So
because they've made an acquisition, didn't they? About
yeah, so they purchased Locker Room, which was a sports related platform relating to social audio. They took it under their umbrella, changed it to Green Room, and then now transitioning it onto their main app and going to be calling it Spotify Live.
Right. So, when you've got people like Spotify investing in this, and you've got LinkedIn that are also investing in it, it's obviously there's a movement here of people that see that it's useful. But you focused on Twitter Spaces, haven't you?
Yeah, Twitter Spaces, just because I'm most savvy with Twitter, that tends to be where I gravitate towards. I kind of know the language, if you will, or the flow, and then you add voice into it, and it becomes a whole new world. Like tweets resonate more. Like if you happen to see Gary Vaynerchuk's tweet, and so that might resonate with you, but when you hear his voice over it, then you're like, all right, now I put the voice with the content, and it kind of adds more human element than just seeing text.
Yes. Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
Almost similar when you go to a rock show or whatever kind of music you listen to. After you hear it live, it's different than when you've heard it before recorded.
Yeah. I went to see Genesis at last Thursday, and it's the first time that I've been to a big concert in a big arena since COVID, and there's something, it's just so different hearing it in that sort of context.
Yeah, especially after the show, then it's like more dynamic of the sound because you've heard kind of the elements of the show.
Yeah. So talk us through. So for people that may not have used social audio, talk us through the functionality. So what do you do? So before, because if think of it as like, I'm going to go to a party. How do I need to dress before I go to that party?
Well, that's one of the perks of social audio is there's very little prep because it is audio only. So a lot of females prefer it because there's no makeup and hair, and
you can sit in your pajamas,
mix and match. Yes, pajamas, gym shorts, you name it. It adapts to your life because you don't have to have it take precedent. You can kind of has it as a secondary vehicle, if you will. I've done dishes while I'm doing social audio. I've cooked a meal, kind of serendipitous with being on social audio. So it definitely allows for that as well. And there's not a commitment factor, depending if you've agreed with the hosts of, I only want to jump in for 15 minutes before dinner with family. So I only want to be there for a limited amount of time. You drop in, listen to maybe a nugget or two, and then leave. And there's not that conference feel of, oh, I have to be here for 4 hours.
Yeah. And I think that ability to dip in and dip out is something, that if you're listening to a podcast, well, in my case, I tend to want to listen to the whole thing. I'll make time for the whole thing. Whereas I think with the social audio, you are able to dip in and dip out. With Twitter Spaces, so it only works on the mobile, doesn't it?
So mobile, if you want to participate, desktop, if you want to listen,
right,
and mobile if you want to conduct a space. So like if you wanted to host a space on that band you mentioned, Genesis, I think it was.
Yes.
So desktop just for listen, and then participate on mobile.
I was just seeing if there was anybody with spaces going, and I was going to show my share it, but it doesn't matter. So and what you do is you just go in and so from if you don't know about it, just go in and listen.
Absolutely. That's the best way to kind of get a feel for it. It's almost even hard to explain without actually going into a room. and I've had a friend who is very new to Twitter that it's almost like the voice is easier to comprehend than the Twitter ecosystem itself. So like I was able to, in a couple steps, get him to where he was live. And for example, in that scenario, I had a friend from Florida join. I had a friend from, not a friend, but someone joined from, I think it was Europe. So within a couple steps, he was hosting a room with at least a couple folks around the world.
Right. And that's the great thing, isn't it? Is the fact that you're able to talk to people across the whole of the world. It's not just, you're not limited to a network that's local or your network that you're connected to. It can be way bigger than that.
Absolutely. And there is a sense of what's so-and-so doing? It looks like they're in a room. So then the curiosity factor comes into play. So that space I mentioned with my friend, one of the participants' coworkers joined. And so it was like, oh, what's this chat about? So there it definitely is that intrigue that also comes into play.
Yeah.
Especially with Twitter Spaces.
So and that's one of the things, isn't it? I think with Twitter or with Twitter Spaces is that it seems to be far more based on around the community and the network, and there seems to be more. The thing about Clubhouse, because of the exclusivity, in a way, it was inclusive. So the fact of the matter was that a lot of people were excluded, therefore. You had less people coming to the rooms, whereas Twitter, because it's exclusive, you're able to get more people to, in effect, and more people are able to come, and they'll just come because they're intrigued about what's going on.
Absolutely, especially where it seems like there was some gap years of general usage. So folks might be like, Twitter is kind of cooled for me. It's not providing me value. I'm not really getting much out of it. Kind of the same way you would go to networking events and you're just not getting anything out of it, either a job or a connection to help your business. So a lot of folks are like, wait, new toy on Twitter? Let's check it out. And I'm noticing that trend of people saying, let me go back to it. I haven't been on this for years. Let's see what this audio functionality is all about.
I think Twitter is understanding that this is an ability to attract more people to the platform and to get the people to come to the platform and stay longer.
Yeah, and come back for sure.
So what are you seeing, in terms of what benefit are you getting from it in terms of its use and what are you getting from it?
Initially, the visibility to connect with leaders in spaces, leaders in industries, even perspectives of different areas. Like you can research all you want, and there's going to be that published information. But like even just a perspective of someone from Arkansas, that might be something that's relevant to your area that you hadn't even thought of, because generally areas tend to think similarly. So when you kind of step out of that, you hear, oh, this is working well. Oh, that's working well. Maybe I should try that. So I think it leads to innovation just because there's just so much intermingling of regions.
So we've had a question from Mike, which is, have you experienced any issues with moderating Twitter as opposed to Clubhouse?
So I actually haven't hosted a club. I've focused mainly on Twitter Spaces. On occasion, there'll be either some technical difficulties, which any live streaming platform is going to have. Hopefully, we don't have any, knock on wood. And occasionally, there'll be folks who are not representing themselves well or have a different agenda, and they're trying to just cause chaos. But it does allow for functionality to control that scenario, either by removing or muting the whole room. So it does allow for that control as the host.
Because when I hosted clubhouses, you would get people come on, and they would immediately try to force their agenda, whether that was the fact that they were selling themselves, selling a book, selling a service, or something like that, and you would know who those individuals were. So I guess, and in the end, you would either block them or just remove them, or.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tend to vet folks quickly if I'm allowing them on stage. And one that I've remembered recently was I was doing a space. It was really ad hoc, or spontaneous. And this gentleman requested to speak, and he had less than 5 followers. So that generally raises a red flag, just because are they brand new, or is it a fake account? And what I do in that scenario is I'll just DM them and just say what they want to speak about. And it was a nice fellow from Germany, and he had just created a new account, so he was fine to go for it.
So what's your recommendation for whether it's an individual or a brand, how to get involved in this? What's your recommendations?
I would say initially see where you're already established. Do you have a Twitter account? Do you have one from the dusty closet, if you will? Do you have LinkedIn, which is coming onto the platform as well as social audio as a whole? Identify Android or iPhone, that can have an indication there. But the best way is just to really dive in. I mean, you could literally take 10 minutes, see what you have, see what you want to try first, and then see. So initially, Twitter Spaces will connect you with rooms that you're already connected with. So if I were connected with you, Tim, on Twitter, which we should connect if we hadn't already, but I would see that Tim's in a room or Tim is listening on a room. So then I could just pop in. So it literally takes maybe 5 minutes to do a first kind of put your toe in, and then so then the second part of that would be, is this content relevant for me? So that's when ideally you would see a room title, and a lot of them have questions like, what's your favorite social audio tip, or what's your favorite beverage to go out? So that's kind of like an engagement factor of what this is about, because human nature is like, all right, what's this discussion about? Is this too in-depth for me? Is this relevant for me? Is it too time consuming even for a drop-in? So I first say start off with just dipping your toe in, get a functionality kind of thing, and then try and find something that's relevant for you.
And what about experimenting? Is that something that you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, especially with once you kind of get a feel for the listening part, which some might be quicker than others, and that's everyone's own pace, then you can kind of experiment with hosting a content yourself, if that's promoting a book, if that's kind of being more of a thought leader in your space. As a whole, it's definitely worth exploring, just because it doesn't have to be this large lift, as we call it these days in the industry. It can be 10 minutes a month. It can be 30 minutes a week. It really depends on what you want out of it initially, because you're going to have those decisions of, do I continue this or not? It just takes a little bit of time to see if it's worth going for you. And you can promote it on different levels. So I did it the first time. I wanted to at least have some folks already committed in a sense. So I reached out to some folks that I knew and had about 5 or 6 people to start. And then it kind of snowballs from there. Or as we used to do in Keith and Kiki spaces, we used to do a waterfall where folks would tweet out the space, the visual, and then that builds that intrigue, like, oh, so-and-so's here, I should join, things like that.
And I've done the same where I basically with a mate in the Clubhouse days, which is where we just said, well, we'll just open a room and what we're going to talk about, running a podcast or something, and just seeing how it goes.
And I was going to say, I think some people have that almost precaution of what if 500 people join, and while that's a good problem to have, the way I look at it,
Yes.
it can be overwhelming at first because you're like, I just had 500 people walk into my virtual house. Now I have to entertain them or provide them with value or provide them with virtual food, if you will. But the chances of that as a first-time Spaces host are pretty unlikely. So it's a build up from there. Certainly there's can be anomalies there. If you're connected with a large account that's verified, that might push the needle further towards that 500. But I don't think people need to have that concern that all of a sudden they're going to do their first space and this huge group comes flooding in. It definitely coincides with learning at the same time of people identifying them at the start. It's almost like a brand new company has to build with time as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I agree, and I think that you have plenty of time to learn the ropes of how you run. Go in and listen. Find people that you respect that are running rooms, so you can understand the etiquette, and run some yourself and get a couple of mates along. And but the thing is that, as you said with tech, is it goes wrong, and to see that as not a failure on your failure on your behalf, but actually as just laugh it off.
Oh, absolutely, and I think folks have that that notion of wanting everything they put out to be pristine, which is admirable. So one strategy you could do prior to putting your brand on notice, if you will, in that sense, you could do it from a personal account, kind of work those inconsistencies, work those challenges, so you know what to expect when you kind of put it under your brand umbrella.
Brian, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your insight. It's been fascinating. I think that social audio is one of those things that's just starting, and it's going to see, when you've got people like LinkedIn, Twitter, Spotify, all investing in this area, they obviously see that there's a need for it. So it's just the start, I think.
Absolutely.
Brian, remind people where they can get hold of you.
Definitely Twitter, Brian Hurst 01, and on LinkedIn, Brian Hurst. And in closing, I think we're just scratching the surface. And when I was chatting with Babylon Brooke from LA, she's mentioned authenticity. So I think that's where it's heading and continues to grow.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for today, Brian. I appreciate you coming and spending the time with us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you if you're still watching for your question as well.